In this webinar, people just asked to talk with reports and they never really said a whole lot of specifics on what they wanted to talk about. So I was going to talk about reports based on calls that I've been getting here recently, mostly from auditors and folks like that asking questions about how to get this and how to get that. It is that time of year when a lot of you are getting to talk to your auditors and having to turn in paperwork and stuff. So I just wanted to reinforce a few things that I'd recommend you be doing all the time. And I've recommended this probably to a lot of you before, but like I said, I just want to go over it again because even today I've talked to two people that, that don't normally do what I'm about to tell you. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the closeout processes, mostly the financial billing, the financial period closeout. When you go through and do this process, there are several reports that automatically come up on the screen or can be chosen to print up whenever you do the processes. If nothing else, you need to be printing the 3 reports that come up when the period activity report option here is selected. And that would give you your period activity report, which is like a little trial balance report. It'll give you the period summary report, which is my favorite report, because it gives you a breakout of all the charges and payments and adjustments by service that you bill for so that you can see what was done for that period. It also gives you your deposit totals if you do any kind of deposits, showing you like new deposits, deposit refunds, deposits credited to account, interest, and so on, and giving you your ending balance at the end. And then there's the last one is the system summary report, which also gives you a breakout of your charges and payments by service. It doesn't do the adjustments, but it does have a column on there to give you year-to-date totals. Now I'll go ahead and show you these real quick right now as we're going through here so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. This is the period summary report, or period activity report, excuse me. And like I said, it's sort of like a trial balance report giving you your beginning balance and the net change that happened in the middle. So this is a combination of the charges and payments and what they add up to, which will hopefully take you from point A to point B and give you all the information that you might need off that report. This one is the period summary, which like I said is my favorite one. You have all your charges here under the debit column, which are things we've done in the program for things like calculations, penalty applications, final bills, anything that generated a charge through a function in the program. Then adjustments are any adjustments that were done, corrections, leak adjustments, whatever the case may be, any kind of manual change that was added on or taken off the accounts, giving us our total debits. Now, if you do accrual accounting like probably about 90% of our customers do, this is your revenue numbers for the period. Then we have our payments, deposit payments, and total payments. Now, I talked a little bit about this last time, but the reason these are broken out are a lot of times deposit payments will go to a separate bank account, and we want you to be able to have those on here where you can see what went into each account and then give you the total at the end. This is the money you should have received during the period as far as payments for some type of transaction. Now, this report also has a little snapshot of your accounts receivable on it of what your customers owe you broken out by types of customers, active, inactive, and new. Just as a little warning, if this one right here, an auditor wouldn't have a problem with because the money, or at least the majority of it, is in the active accounts. But if you looked at one of these reports and you notice that the majority of your money is in your inactive accounts, your auditor's probably going to want to have a discussion with you. Pardon me again. They don't like it when the majority of the receivables exist in inactive accounts because it tends to mean you're having trouble collecting the money or not giving enough effort to do so, in their opinion at least. I'm not pointing fingers or anything like that, but that's the assumption that comes up if they ever see that. And they can write you up for that if it continues over a period of time. Now down here is what I was talking about with deposits. And regretfully, my play database here, I don't have a lot of deposit transactions. But imagine here if you put in new deposits, they would show up here in this first line. Deposits refunded back to the account as far as a check, and interest refunded would be in the next two blocks. Deposits credited back to the account and or interest credited back against the account's balance would show up here. And lastly would be deposit changes, or you may have increased somebody's deposit, like for example, if you require somebody to add another deposit if they've been delinquent for so long or cut off, that would not be necessarily a new deposit, but a deposit change because you're increasing the deposit that they already had. And yeah, that's kind of semantics because it works in the both, but that's the way it's labeled and listed in the program. So going from your beginning deposit balance up here and adding or subtracting all these values in should take you once again down to the ending deposit balance, which is what's still outstanding for your customers. And the last one, as I mentioned, is going to be the system summary report, which once again, by each service, you have your charges and your payments that you may have done. It also compares it to the last period and gives you a little comparison here, plus the year-to-date totals over here to the side. Now this column is cleared whenever you go in and say, yes, I want to reset the year-to-date totals at the end, which is going to be right after this option here. This would clear your year-to-date option and would also give you a yearly closeout report, which I made look like the system summary or period summary report rather, because like I said, it is my favorite report. And it is the report I was helping auditors create if the customer didn't have anything to show them at the end of the year. But that's what these options are for here. And I do recommend that you do a period closeout regularly, whether it's every month, bi-monthly, quarterly, or something. Most auditors would like you to see it done it monthly so that they can keep a steady flow of information as far as your activity during the year. Now, the second half of that is going to be the other report that auditors love to see is either an age receivables report or an accounts receivable report. And quite honestly, I like the age receivable reports a lot more. Now, regretfully, this is going to be one of the longer reports in our program because it is giving a breakout of each one of the customers in your system by their age balances. And you do want to present it to the customer by for every book in your system so that the numbers will match up to your financial closeouts. But this will give you a breakout for each income center where the balances reside, as well as over here to the end. This is technically your accounts receivable balance over here at the very end. So you're kind of getting both in this one system. Now, like I said, this report can be rather long. I have a rather clean database here with just a handful of accounts in it. So mine's only about 26 pages long. For some people, though, if you have a lot of accounts, it could range in the hundreds of pages. Now, the largest one I've probably seen has only been about 300 pages long, which is still a lot, but it's not as long as some people might imagine. Now, these all can be written out to a PDF file as well using a process in the system we have called report archiving. Any and all of these reports that you can see here on the list may be written out when you go in to print them and saved as a PDF file. I've actually been to a couple customers' offices that the only thing they print out in their office are bills. Everything else they write to a PDF file. At the end of the year, they just burn it to a CD or stick it on a flash drive and hand it to their auditor and go back to work, because they literally save every report they could print on there, so there's nothing that they couldn't present to the auditor that's already not on that list. If you're not using this and are interested in it, please give us a call, and I'll be happy to help you set it up. It's pretty straightforward, and all it requires is to save it is you go in and generate the report in some form or fashion. Like, for example, with this one, the age receivables complete that I printed a moment ago, if you get to this point right here and hit your printer button, and that is set to save the report, it would just do it for you right now. So you have the option at that point of printing it anyway to paper, so you have both a hard copy and a electronic copy, or you can just cancel off here and just be happy with the electronic copy you have out there instead of using all that paper up. Now that works with any of them, like I said, that are on our list there. Plus, if you're not aware of it, any report that comes up to screen like this is Crystal Reports. This is a third-party report writer that we've been using in our software since it was written, and use it for actually both our products. It is one of the best report writers out in the market, and it does give you the capability of exporting things out to PDF. The little floppy disk option up here, which is also kind of like an age test in case you've never seen a floppy disk yet, will bring up an export screen where you have an option of exporting it to any of these different choices. Now, if you want to send the report out to Excel, I would recommend using this option here, the Excel data only, because otherwise it's going to try to put all these little headers and stuff all over the place, and it's going to limit the amount of information it writes out to the file. So if you just did normal Excel, you're not going to get as good a results as you would if you did the data only. But for what we're talking about, the report archiving, it uses a PDF format so that you can always pull it up and view it later on and reprint it if you need. Same thing with this one right here. It's basically automating this process I'm doing right now by telling it what pages to send out, where to write it to, and what the default name for the report would be. So you can do it manually and put them wherever you want to, or for any of the reports that are on the report archiving screen, we can do it for you automatically instead of you having to go through all these different steps. Now, if we do it through the report archiver, it does incorporate the date, sometimes the account number, sometimes the audit number, depending on what the report is that we're sending out, so that you'll easily be able to identify it, find it, and reprint it or give it to your auditor in case that's what they're needing to see. Okay, that's my soapbox as far as the closeout stuff goes. But please make sure that you do those. And the main reason is some of those reports I can't recreate, plain and simple. They're stored every period, or in some cases every day, depending on the report process you're running. We store information since the last time you closed it out, and we flag it whether we've actually printed it on a report before or included it in your monthly totals, so we don't put it in more than one report or more than one period's report. So at the end of the report, when you say yes to close it out, we clear all that information that we've been storing and start accumulating for the next period. In the case of a lot of the closeout reports, if you can give me the audit range, I can recreate some of the reports, but some of them I cannot. The age receivables and accounts receivables reports are live data reports. They're based on whatever's in your system right at that moment. So I can't go back even a day, even a couple hours, and give you that report if you've made any financial changes. Now, the main reason for that, because I'd love to be able to do it, is basically disk size. When this program was originally generated, originally written, we let you guys use the free version of SQL, so you don't have to go out and buy SQL, well, the SQL program, whatever version happens to be out. I think it's now 17. 2017 is the current version. But in the earlier versions, it was only a 2 gig database maximum size. And for us to be able to store all the information to be able to recreate all these reports, it would quickly have exceeded that. And so we couldn't store it all. We had to draw a line in the sand, I guess you'd say, and say, okay, this is all we can let people do. Since the database default sizes or maximum sizes are growing, or they're large now, they're up to 10 gig in size, I am starting to save a little bit more information than I was before. In the more recent versions of the program, I've started saving where you can go in and reprint your final bills. And in the current version we're starting to release, I am storing the information for the period summary report, so I can go back and recreate that from previous periods. I still haven't got brave enough to do the accounts or age receivables report because of the amount of data that's going to entail, but it'll probably be one of the next ones that I start doing and saving, because it is one of the more common calls I get. In fact, I have one in the queue right now to be able to go back and create the reports from the last year's closeout. So we'll have to see what we can do with that to help the customer, but that is why in a lot of cases we do ask you to print a lot of these reports, and it's because we would have difficulty getting the data back for some of them. Okay, a couple other things I wanted to talk about besides that. For those of you, I'm all sure you've at least been to this screen once and seen all the reports that we have in here. You know that a lot of these are reprints of reports in other screens where you can get them back, but there are also different things like your work order reports if you do work orders. Now, these all have been put down together, labeled as work order something, because a lot of people didn't realize all the work order reports they had in the system, so I grouped them all together now where people can see them a bit easier. But there are some usage reports that are in the system where you can go in and print usage by rate code breakouts, by customer types in case you need to report by that, and or just the total usage for a date range. All of these will ask you for a period date range to print that report in, and for the first two they will give you a breakout for each period plus a total at the end. The last one out here just gives you a total usage report for the date range that you ask for. But these are some of the more common reports that people need or need to go back and get, and so we're adding more of those in the system. And as you request different reports, I am trying to add them into the system and get them in there, especially if they're useful for everybody, not just for the customer that's asking for it. And then, of course, we have our report writer down here where you can go in and create your own reports off some of the views that we have in the system. And that'll probably be saved for a different class, because I could talk for a couple hours on that one and go over ways to create different reports and stuff in the system. Now, I did want to talk about a few of the other reports that are out here. One of the ones you may have noticed when I did the Closeout Financial Period, a new one that I've added is the Period Statistics Report. It does ask you for a water loss number, so if you are keeping track of your wells in the system, we can give you water loss report numbers on a different report besides the pump station comparison report. I do not have well numbers in this database, so it's going to look a bit odd. But what it would show you here is the amount of pumped out from your wells minus your known loss minus whatever loss we've kind of come up with in the system, which is the difference between the usage used by the customers and the amount pumped through from your pump stations or wells. And that'll give you a water loss percentage and a water loss just straight number. Now, this report is really designed to be used for like board meetings and such like that, where your board members may want a snapshot of everything going on in your system right now. This report shows you all the amounts charged out, your current receivables, your current payments and deposit numbers that have been brought in, and the current usages and their breakout amongst these tiers we have here in the system, giving you a percentage of the total usage and a percentage of the sales out to the side. So it's a useful little report for that. It will generally not go over 2 pages long, and a lot of that will depend on how many income centers you have turned on as to how many we have to report in some of these different areas here. So it's a fairly short, concise report that will give them the information that might need for that. I'll forget to uncheck everything else. There's also, if you use split penalty, there's a split penalty report that comes up there giving your split penalty numbers for the end of the period and some different things like that as well. Okay, some other reports that are fairly useful. On the customer screen itself, you have the ability to print up sort of a customer history report, or what we call account details, which shows you different information about the current balances, the reading and payment history of the account, and at the end of it, a listing of all the payments that have come in for that customer, what audit number they fell in, what type of payment it was, the audit numbers and such like that, so that you can help track things down. Now, this can also be useful if you have a customer questioning payments that you've received from them, because you can show them here all the payments that have been received for their account and when you received them. That way you can show them if a payment hasn't been received, that that check wasn't received or something like that. You can also come in here to the billing history, and you can reprint their older bills to show them, and I'm a little bit behind here, let's go back a little farther, to show them the pattern of the age balances or previous balances increasing because you've not received that payment, and show them that you have been putting them in when you got it, but you haven't received the payment from them for quite a while, and that's why their balances are this way. Now, to reprint these, in case you haven't played with it, there is a bill run number right here mixed in with this little printout here. The bill run number is what you want to look for on this list here to know which bill you want to reprint out. Now, this does print out on a regular sheet of paper, so you don't have to worry about having bills or losing bills in there because you're only printing maybe one at a time. It is a little bit better information for doing things like that. Another useful report to print out is when you're trying to track something down, like I was doing with the customer this morning, is something like detailed transaction reports. Instead of reading them off these screens, which is a little confusing sometimes, you can use the print option over here to the side, and it breaks everything out by audit number so that you can see things a bit easier and see how things were charged out and paid in the system. So if you're trying to track down or figure out, in the case this morning, a missing deposit, some of these reports can help you find those. The ones we used this morning was the audit summary report, which is a report you can print out at time of closeout and or from the report screen, and we used a detail audit report, which is a report in the system that you can use to replace any report that's been lost. It doesn't give you all the same formatting of it, but it will give you the information. Like, for example, I'm going to reprint audit 2745. And this shows us everything that was done in this calculation process. Each one of the people that was charged out, how much they were charged for each service, so that if you lost your calculation report and needed the numbers for your accountant or your auditor, this would be the way to recover it, especially from periods past when we couldn't go back and do a re-verify or reapply to get you the report again. But this would be a replacement for it just to give them the charge numbers of the amounts that were charged out in that particular calculation. Now, this can be used for anything in the system that generated an audit number for it. You can reprint using the detailed audit report. Now, that's if you didn't have a copy of the final bill or something errored out where we couldn't print it, which means it probably didn't get saved, or if you lost your closeout reports from previous periods and you needed to get some of the audit information from some of the reports on there, or anything like that, that report can be used to remake any of the financial reports or audited reports in the system. Others are things like the payment register report in case you've lost one of those. You can always come to the screen and reprint it. If you're doing payment plans, you can reprint those from here and get a list of everybody that's on your payment plans and different things of that nature. Now, another useful report that I wanted to mention that I'm sure a lot of you probably have printed at least once or may print all the time is also here on the report screen, and it's an unread meter list. I recently have had a lot of users that are having trouble when they get to their closeout billing cycle and they can't close it out because some people are coming up on the list as unread. Well, this is from the previous billing period. So if these are active accounts, they did not get billed or read when the rest of your accounts were read, and so they were missed, and you haven't collected or billed them for their water use. I've had a lot of people start printing these or encourage them to start printing these before they print their bills so that they can make sure they're not missing anybody. This way you're not, losing any revenue, because I know for a fact, even though I'm not really that big on it, a lot of folks at the end of the month, when they get ready to close out and do the next billing, they're in such a tight schedule at that point that they just make those accounts new so they can close out and move forward, which means they didn't bill them for anything last month. Now, true in most cases, usages do catch up. You're always going to be able to track the amount of usage that was used. But if you do a minimum charge every month, like, for example, for the first 2,000 units, we're going to charge $20, that won't be figured up the next month. You'd actually have to go in and adjust that on the account if you wanted to charge them for it, or something of that nature, which would be extra work for you. And like I said, usually under a bit of a time crunch when it comes to printing the bills, and it just may be something you didn't have time to do, so you've forgotten again. So if you have any concerns that you're not reading everybody, or you have had that pop up a lot where you're getting a lot of at least one or two active accounts show up on your unread meter list when you go in to close out your billing cycle, I would recommend taking a couple minutes and running this report at the end of your calculation process before you move on to like drafts or billing or whatever your next step would be after doing all your calculations. That way you can make sure that everybody's read and not missed, And even if they don't get printed with everybody you're sending the bills out for, you can send somebody out to read them and get a reading and send their bill out maybe a day late, but at least their bill will go out. Now, alternatively, if you're really under a time crunch and the weather's bad, you can go into processes under readings, and if you found some people that you didn't read and apply this period, you can go into other readings, set your date, pick your book, and choose to estimate or something like that on the unread only accounts, which means anybody that didn't get a meter reading for some reason, you're going to do an estimation on or use the same reading as last time to get them just a minimum bill, and that way they're going to get billed for at least something. And like I said, the usage a lot of times will catch up, so that on your next bill you will catch up for any usage you didn't bill them for this time. Pardon me again. Those are the main reports I wanted to go over. I guess I'll give you folks some time to ask any questions, or if there's any reports you wanted to see that I didn't cover or had questions on, I'll be happy to answer those now.
I'm not seeing any questions on my side, but we'll wait a couple more minutes and see if anyone types anything in on additional questions or reports they would like to go over.
For those of you who know me, I'll talk about anything, any report that you want to know about or anything like that. So please, if you have any questions, let me know what they might be, and I'll be happy to go over them with you.
All right, we have someone asking about the rate study.
Okay, kind of figured that one might pop up. For anybody who's gone through a rate change, and especially if you haven't done one for a few years, a lot of times the state or whatever your regulatory commission is will require you to do a rate study report to justify the changes that you want to make, or at least give them some statistical information about what you're going to be doing in this rate change. Now, the rate change process can be accessed from two places, or rate study process rather. It can be accessed here on the report screen, or over here on the left-hand side under reports there's an option for rate study over here as well. Both those two screens will take you to this screen here, which is our rate study form screen. Now, for a lot of you, when you look at it, it looks sort of a combination, or looks a lot like our Income Center setup screen, and it does have a lot of the same properties. You do have a listing over here of all your different income centers that you may be billing for, or services that you may be billing for. And any of these can be used to do a rate study report on. Over here in the left, we have a series of buttons, the first one being the ranges setup. This is where you can go in and show us or tell us how you want the report broken out as far as the two reports that are generated, the usage report and the actual financial rate study report. Some people want it in a very detailed manner, in other words, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 100, 150, and so on. Other people do it in a lot broader ranges, like 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 50, and 100,000 units or something like that. Any of those are fine. It just depends on how you want to see it. But I would always recommend that you start with a line that has a 0 and end with a line that has a plus sign. That way, no matter what the steps are in the middle, we're not going to miss any usage. We're going to catch everybody that didn't have any, and we're going to catch anybody that may be over whatever the highest value you have set in here. Now, this is kind of our standard one here. I don't know really who came up with these numbers, but this is kind of our standard that we have in here, and you can come up here and highlight and delete the numbers just by hitting your delete key on your keyboard, or you can come in here and change them to whatever values they want and come down and add more as you need to until you get the layout like you want it. The Create a Copy option allows you to create a copy of your actual existing rate code, your live ones that you're billing for right now. It may tell you there's one already out there, and that's fine. If you haven't done a rate study for a while, you are going to want to create a new copy. If you've been doing this quite a bit for the last few days and you just want to start over, you may want to create a new copy all over again then as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes here, and it's just going to think for a moment. It just takes it a couple moments to create a copy of your rate codes. Under the edit option, you can go in here and you can edit your existing rate codes. Now this is a copy of them as it says up here at the top, so you are not modifying your live rate codes. This will not affect them whatsoever, so you can play with this without fear of messing up billing or anything else by the changes you're going to make. But this screen here is basically our Income Center setup screen, where you can go in and select your rate code and make your changes however they may be, whether it's more steps or changing the usage steps that are down here, or changing just the charge per 1,000 units or minimum steps down here at the bottom. Once you've made these changes, of course, you save in between just like you would on a regular rate code, and you go in and you go to the next one until you get them all taken care of. I'm going to go ahead and pick the W1 rate code here, which is probably our basic rate code, and I'm going to make a little change to it here, making this $60 as the minimum and $3.50, oops, I hit period, for each step after that, so we can kind of see what the changes would look like. Okay, you can do these for as many of the rate codes I mentioned as before. You can do this for as many services as you need to report on. But when we do the actual rate study, you can only do the report one income center at a time. So I'm going to move on to this now. And the rate study itself allows us to check the service that you want to run it for now, which I'm going to pick water. It gives us all of our rate codes, which we can do it for all the rate codes if you want to. Or in my case, I just made a change to one of the rate codes, which was W1, so I'm going to deselect all the others and just pick the rate code I want. Now, when we first wrote this, it would do it from this period back 12 months. But now if this period cycle wasn't closed out, it wouldn't report on this period. So it made it a bit hard to get a good year's worth of rates. My predecessor added a feature in here called Use Alternate Rate Range, or Date Range. I usually go in and pick the last month of the previous year, or a previous year, and that's what I'm going to start the report on. So my report in this case is going to go from December of 2018 back 12 months, so it's going to cover the whole calendar year of 2018. And that way you've got a good report on a full year. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it to print now. And this is the usage report that it's all being based on. This is showing us broken out by the steps that we had on that first option I showed you, how much usage customers had in each one of these steps. So in the zero usage step, there were 3 customers last January that didn't use any usage, 7 in March, May, and so on across the list. Over here in January, there were 5 people total that used anywhere from 1 to 1,000 units of usage. So in this case, the cumulative total is 1,500 units, and so on down the list. This breaks it out by book and by rate code in case you selected multiple rate codes. So these numbers here are what the actual usage or rate study financial report is going to be based on. So I'm going to close this down and it's going to think for a minute. It is now recalculating all the charges for last year, but it's doing them in the groups or steps that we had set up instead of individually account by account, which would probably take it quite a bit of time to go back and recalculate all your customers. But in this case, as we see here, I have the zero usage again. This is what I charged out before, $168 based on my existing rate codes. But now I'm going to be proposing to charge out $180 because I increased it from $56 to $60 per customer. So that's a 7% increase. As we go down here and look, it's going to stay about 7% because the usage didn't change for the lower levels until we get down here to the 5,000 step. The 5,000 step where it's going to jump up to 109%, 110%, and so on down the category. Now, sometimes this may actually be less than 100%, which means you're lowering your rates, which is probably not the end goal most of the time when customers are doing a rate study. So be wary of that on there because usually you're looking for something close to some percentage goal, like let's just say a 10 or 15% rate increase. Well, for some people I've talked to who haven't done rate changes in like a decade, they're looking for close to a 25% increase to cover the water costs and operation costs that they're now using. This report will give you a grand total at the end of what the increases were. Now, as it turned out, in January we had about a 10% increase total, 8% or 7% in all the rest of the months of the year. Overall, for all the months, there was an 8% increase. And this is why down here are the changes that I made in the original rates. So if you're looking for something greater than an 8% increase, like I may have been, this isn't what you wanted to get. So you're going to want to close this down, and probably this as well, and you're going to go back to edit your copy, and you're just going to start with this all over again. Okay, maybe if I make this 375 instead of 350, excuse me, it'll get us closer to the numbers we're looking for. Or maybe even break out another step and charge it in different ways. It can sometimes take several tries to get to the number you're getting to, and or the way that your board is proposing you to make the rate changes and get them to a level that is acceptable. And when I say acceptable, years ago I had a customer come into the office. They were just down the street where their office was, so they came in for a visit, and we were going through this rate study process, and she had come up with these numbers that she thought were just perfect. The problem was she was barely charging her high usage customers any increase, and she was barely charging customers that didn't use any usage any increase, like 1 or 2%, and her bulk of her customers were being charged like 35% increase. Well, fearing for her life as well as her job, she decided she needed to redo those numbers to spread them out a little bit more than what she'd done before, because she didn't want anybody to come and lynch her for the numbers that she was proposing. So what you're aiming for is the increase that the board or whomever has requested, plus you kind of want to do it fair where it is affecting all your customers on a kind of even keel so that nobody's going to raise too many complaints about it. Everybody's going to complain anyway because you're charging them more money. So you're trying to limit the phone calls you're getting anyway. Does that answer everybody's questions on rate study, or is there any other questions you have on it I can go over?